Lexus says its 5th generation LS reimagines what a large luxury boardroom sector saloon should be, and it kind of does, in its own unique, distinctive way.
With this 5th generation version of its large luxury saloon, the LS, Lexus looks to showcase all it can be. This time around there's a non-plug-in hybrid petrol 3.5 litre V6 beneath the bonnet and the option of all-wheel drive if you want it. What hasn't changed is that opulence, refinement and sheer attention to detail still get top billing. Back in 1989, the launch of the original version of this LS model redefined the luxury saloon segment. The engineers behind it tasked to create nothing less than the best luxury car in the world. Few would argue that they succeeded. Seems rather ridiculous now to remember that back then, the European makers who ruled the flagship four-door market sector defined luxury as being as much about wood and leather as it was about ride and refinement. Thanks to this Japanese brand, cars of that kind were finally transformed from boardroom barges into the technological showcases that buyers had a right to expect from their inflated price tags. Today, the LS is still a technological showcase, but it isn't the obvious segment choice that it was for a brief period in the early 90s until the European opposition caught up. The engineers have been working on that, though, the result being the 5th generation version that we're going to look at here. A boardroom sector large saloon that claims to break new ground in design, technology and performance, extending the boundaries of automotive luxury. Now that's quite a claim when rivals in this class are as accomplished as the Mercedes S-Class, the BMW 7 Series and the Audi A8. Now Lexus knows that its contender will be a much more individual choice than competitors of that sort, and they've created this car to suit that remit. Typical LS buyers won't want the planet-polluting diesel engines that those rival models still prioritise, and they'd like an interior that's more personal and engaging. So here, cutting-edge hybrid technology and unique Japanese Takumi craftsmanship aim to provide just that. We're promised a more rewarding driving experience too, despite the fact that for the first time in an LS, there's no V8 option beneath the bonnet. This car does, after all, sit on the same sophisticated GAL platform as the brand's highly rated LC Coupe. And like that car, it's quite arresting to look at too, the saloon styling now featuring a more flowing coupe-like vibe. Lots to look at then in this very rare, very unique interpretation of what a modern, large luxury saloon really ought to be. Seat yourself comfortably in this leather-lined cabin, and from the moment that the power-adjustable steering wheel glides into reach and the cabin lighting finishes its coordinated welcome sequence, you know that this is going to be a very luxurious experience. Press the starter button and you're reminded that it'll be a particularly quiet one too. In place of the unpleasant far-off diesel rumble that you'll get in the most popular versions of segment rivals, you'll initially enjoy the sound of silence. All versions of this car for our market being of the LS 500h petrol-electric hybrid variety. Even when the big 3.5 litre V6 up front cuts in, which happens after a mile or under firm acceleration, the engine sounds like it's operating in another country, which is exactly what you expect. The original Lexus LS was the quietest car in the world at launch, and the Japanese engineers reckon that this one continues with that tradition. In fact, the designers claim that the rear seat level of what they call conversational clarity is almost 100%, even at the British legal limit of 70 miles an hour. For the first time in an LS, there's no V8 on offer, not anywhere in the world, which seems odd because there's a very good 5 litre one fitted to the model that shares this car's all-new GAL platform, the LC Coupe. Lexus has developed a twin-turbo 3.5 litre V6 to replace that unit in the LS with a 416 bhp output. That's 30 bhp more than the V8 could offer in the previous generation version of this model. Other markets get that power plant, but we don't. The brand thinks, probably rightly, that a conventional petrol-powered LS would have limited appeal here, hence the hybrid-only approach this time around. When you learn that the engine in question is of the old-fashioned, normally aspirated variety, and that on the face of things, it's broadly similar to the one used in the company's soft, syrupy RX luxury SUV, your expectations might not be too high when it comes to the road-going experience that this LS is likely to deliver. Hold off though on snap judgments just for a moment while we tell you a bit more about this hybrid package, because there is a chance that you may well end up warming to it. For a start, the V6 isn't quite the same unit used in the RX, having been redeveloped for higher performance use using what Lexus calls multi-stage hybrid technology. It's very clever and very difficult to explain in a few words, but let's try. Basically, there are two automatic transmissions in an LS500H. Firstly, a belt-driven ECVT gearbox with 3 distinct gears. That's the kind of thing that you usually get in a hybrid. Secondly, though, and more uniquely, there's also a further so-called shift device, and that's essentially a conventional cog-style 4-speed auto box. 3 of the 4 speeds of that shift device are used to amplify and multiply the basic trio of ECVT gears, thereby creating 9 virtual ratios. In addition to those, the 4th ratio of that shift device functions as a top overdrive motorway cruising gear, making a total of 10 speeds. Yeah, told you it's complicated. Now, because there are so many ratios, in theory there's less potential for the hesitancy that you normally get with belt-driven CVT automatic transmissions. And because the whole setup is underpinned by intelligent software, it's able to tailor itself to the way that you drive, taking into account the severity of your throttle and steering inputs to adjust the way that those various virtual gears are served up. All of this works up to a point. There is certainly less delay under hard acceleration than you would get in the RX or in earlier large hybrid-powered Lexus models, but a stab like that on the throttle quickly confirms that a sense of hesitancy still prevails here. And of course, there's nothing like the pulling power that you get in a comparable black pump fueled contender in this sector. This engine puts out just 350 Newton meters of torque, which, to give you some perspective, is about half what you get in a rival Audi, BMW or Mercedes diesel model. Still, the 354 bhp total output of this LS is nothing to sniff at. It's made possible by the way that the relatively feeble, normally aspirated engine gets a welcome 177 bhp boost from its associated electric motor, and that in turn is powered by an 84-cell lithium-ion battery. All those braked horses are enough to take this car to 62 miles an hour in about 5.5 seconds, which, to give you a little bit of segment perspective, is faster than any V6-powered supercharged Jaguar XJ can manage. Top speed, that's set at 155 miles an hour, and there's even our rather pleasing metallic-y V60 engine note to add a bit of atmosphere. The standard sound is embellished by clever trickery through the stereo speakers. To hear it at its best, you have to twist this rather curious control on the left-hand corner of the instrument binnacle into the Sport S mode, which, in the way that these setting systems do, sharpens the throttle response, the steering feel and the gear shift timings, plus ride quality too, and that is courtesy of the standard AVS, adaptive variable suspension setup. A further more extreme Sport S Plus mode is also offered, but we're not quite sure why you'd ever want to use that in an LS, well, unless of course you've stolen it. There are various other drive mode selections that you can make. A custom option allows you to tailor your personal drive preferences. An eco mode focuses on frugality, and most importantly, a comfort setting. And now that is crucial if any credence is to be given to Lexus's insistence that this car will be able to waft you from home to boardroom with the same graceful demeanour as its rivals. In reality, it can't quite do that, even if you avoid entry-level trim and get the air suspension system, which is fitted as standard to all the other models. With the comfort setting dialed in, the ride's certainly very good, but it doesn't quite have the magic carpet-like feel that key rivals can deliver. The mandatory run-flat tyres don't help here either. It matters less that this Lexus isn't as agile as its rivals, even if you take up the option the brand offers of adding in all-wheel drive, a standard feature on the top Premier variant that we're trying today. This car's prodigious weight doesn't help here. It's nearly 350 kilos heavier than a comparable Audi A8, for example. You need an awful lot of handling tech to compensate for that kind of shortfall. Still, in the minority interest rear-driven F-Sport variant, Lexus has had a stab at providing it, including variable ratio ratio steering and rear wheel steering that together give this LS quicker turn-in through tighter, slower bends and a greater feeling of security and stability through faster ones. To be honest though, we can't really see the point if you're driving this car in a manner that would really reap the benefits of that technology, then you've probably long since left its comfort zone. That, of course, lies at cruising speeds. Now, we remarked earlier on this car's exemplary refinement, and that's made possible by the use of double-glazed windows, active noise cancellation by the stereo speakers, and even noise-suppressing alloy wheels, which incorporate little resonance chambers that break up the waves of air pressure that would otherwise turn into road roar. It's on the highway that you'd expect this 5th generation model's Lexus Co-Drive 2 Level 2 autonomous driving technology to come into its own. It's made up of two main features: dynamic radar cruise control, which uses a sophisticated millimeter wave radar and camera package to read the road ahead, and lane tracing assist, which keeps the car within lane delineating lines without you needing to steer. Neither feature, though, functions as smoothly or as intuitively as rival German brand setups. A work in progress there then, and that's a comment that perhaps could be more broadly applied to this 5th generation LS model. Chief Engineer Toshio Asahi says his team are working on hybridizing the twin-turbo 3.5 litre V6 that we've said is offered in other markets with this car. That'll at least partly solve the pulling power issue, and in combination with further developed camera driving tech, it'll make this Lexus a more complete proposition. Even as it is though, there is a lot to like here if you want something different in this sector. The LS can't redefine its segment, but it certainly makes it a more interesting place. It's taken 5 generations and over a quarter of a century of development for Lexus to come up with an LS that has what its German rivals boasted all along: its own visual identity. This one is a departure from its predecessors in its switch from a traditional 3-box saloon silhouette to the kind of lower and more sweeping profile that you'd expect from a 4-door Grand Tourer. The completed effect isn't quite as stunning as the LS FC concept car that this styling is supposedly based on, but it does make a unique statement, and we like it very much. A key change this time around, and one that Lexus might ultimately regret, is the brand's decision not to offer the kind of lengthier wheelbase body style that's available from every other main contender in the luxury large saloon segment. Now, the company thinks that isn't needed because this 5th generation LS has a wheelbase already extended by 35mm over the stretch version of the previous model. It also, by the way, has a 15mm lower roofline, and thanks to the lower front suspension towers permitted by the new GAL platform, a bonnet 30mm closer to the ground. Now, this all combines to create a bold, confident piece of penmanship. That's something chief designer Koichi Suga apparently created after outline sketches on dozens of small post-it notes. It's certainly big and imposing. I mean, so much so that even these huge 20-inch wheels look quite small. This being a Lexus, the detailing is almost obsessively intricate, especially at the front, where this interpretation of the marque's trademark spindle grille represents one of the most complex pieces of automotive sculpture you're likely to find. The intricate mesh design has over 5,000 individual surfaces, and it has an appearance that changes with the light. And it's flanked by ultra-compact triple bi-LED headlights housed in a narrow slit that merges with the LED daytime running lights. Now, these also function as sequential turn indicators, and they're set in an L-shaped configuration that wraps around the car, incorporating 16 super bright LEDs which illuminate in less than a tenth of a second. Now, the rear end is without doubt the most divisive part of this design, and for connoisseurs of this class of car, the prominent bulky boot lid might bring to mind the controversial E65 BMW 7 Series from the turn of the century. To be fair, the end product here is somewhat sleeker than that. The strong profile shoulder line connects into these combination taillights and then folds down and back on itself to blend into the rear diffuser in a way that's supposed to echo the shaping of that spindle grille. These boomerang-shaped creases in each rear wing that flow from the outer edge of each lamp cluster are interesting, and the chromed lower exhaust pipe finishing is neat. As usual, what's more important though is the stuff you can't see. Now, we mentioned the stiff, sophisticated GAL Global Architecture luxury platform this car also shares with the fashionable LC Coupe. Well, it plays a crucial part in making these two models the most rigid, structurally advanced series production cars that Lexus has ever made. And that is thanks to a structure fashioned from a mix of several grades of steel, carbon fibre reinforced plastic and aluminium. Aluminium is now usually used as a fundamental for chassis construction in this segment, but for this car, Lexus chose steel, claiming it makes the platform stronger. Well, that may well be true, but it's also made this model significantly heavier than its rivals. A four-wheel drive Audi A8, for example, is over 300 kilos lighter than a rear-driven LS, and that is a big difference. Right, time to take a look inside at an interior apparently inspired by omotenashi, the Japanese art of hospitality. Sounds ridiculous, but it works a treat, as you discover when you're approaching the car to get in. Now, providing you've ignored entry-level trim and your LS is equipped with air suspension, a premium access function automatically raises this low-slung saloon by 40mm to an ideal 555mm hip height in just 4 seconds when the vehicle's unlocked. So high, in fact, that taller folk might need to watch their heads on the way in. For the driver and front seat passenger, there's a sense as you take your seat of the car being prepared for your arrival. The seat moves rearwards and rises to aid your entry, as does the steering wheel. The seat bolster cushion opens out to help you ease into place and then returns to cosseting you once you're comfortable and you're able to address up to 28 adjustment variations. Even the seat belt holder rises by 50mm to make buckling up easier. The cabin lighting adds to the welcome with illumination which is apparently inspired by the soft glow of traditional Japanese andon lanterns. Now you're comfortable, take a look around. Have you ever been in a cabin quite like this? Well, no, we haven't either. The attention to detail is obsessive, and it reflects the fact that every LS is signed off by a small team of so-called Takumi specialists. There are just 12 of them at the brand's giant Kyushu factory, and it's a goal for many of the plant's workers to become one of these Takumi master craftsmen one day. To demonstrate their dexterity and visual precision, these experts maintain their revered status by daily demonstrating that they can make a perfect origami cat in just 90 seconds using only their non-dominant hand. Yes, really. But it's not just the fit and finish, it's also the opulence of the materials used, like Art Deco wood produced with the help of the people who make Yamaha pianos, and on this top Premier model, the option of a new kind of L-aniline leather upholstery that Lexus claims is up to 30% softer than the hide used in rival models. The stitched dashboard feels unique too, featuring a sweeping array of fixed horizontal metal fins spanning its full width, neatly concealing the movable fins that direct airflow from the air conditioning vents. Now, these vents have an intuitive style of output, courtesy of the Climate Concierge system. Now, this uses infrared technology to monitor the body temperatures of all the car's occupants, and it adjusts the climate control settings to suit, even taking into account factors like sunlight shining into one side of the cabin. Other beautiful detailed touches include this hand-stitched gear knob, these equally tactile magnesium alloy paddle shifters, and this gorgeous analog clock. Avoid entry-level trim and you'll get seats with 28-way adjustment and 5 separate shiatsu massage functions, plus a thumping 23-speaker Mark Levinson reference surround sound audio system with special QLI technology which separates audio sources into individual streams. So, for example, you'll be able to hear the individual instruments in an orchestral piece. If you can afford more and have this top Premier model, a pricey optional pleat pack gets you a couple of extra finishing touches. These delicate Kiriko glass inserts, they are a bit Liberace for our tastes, and this equally unique pleated door card finish created using the time-honoured skills of origami paper folding. There's more unusual design in the distinctive instrument binnacle. Now you view this through this 3-spoke wheel, which, although it is a touch over buttoned, feels great to hold. The combination meter display is set in an elegant stitched leather frame, and it's similar to that used in the LC Coupe. An 8-inch TFT screen springs into life with animated graphics to start up and delivers a circular speedometer layout, and that changes in colour depending on the drive mode that you select. There's blue for eco, there's grey for comfort, and red for the two sport settings. Plus, there's a customizable section in the middle of the display that can deliver a digital speedo, or if you wish, trip computer, energy monitor, tyre pressure, compass and safety system information. Not that you'll have to look at all this much, because as standard, LS drivers are provided with the world's largest head-up display, a jet aircraft-inspired 24-inch projection that can show far more detail than rival systems, almost too much in fact. Bright yellow arrows for potential hazards sometimes flash up to embellish the usual speed and navigation info. Perhaps inevitably, though, there are also design elements that don't work quite so well. The horns sticking out on either side of the instrument binnacle with settings for the driving modes on the left and traction control on the right just look odd. The surround view camera system, which gives you a 360-degree overhead tour of the car at the press of a button, has the most unrealistic graphics that we've seen for a long time. You can also change the colour of the car depicted, although why you'd ever want to, we're not quite sure. More significantly, we just don't understand why so many of the functions of the brand's standard Lexus Premium navigation package have to work via this fiddly touchpad down by the gear stick. It's almost impossible to use properly on a bumpy road, and it's generally just much less intuitive to access than the simple circular dial that you get with a rival BMW iDrive infotainment setup. Fortunately, you do get a rotary controller and some proper buttons at the bottom of the centre stack to operate the audio system, and there's a proper CD player nearby, and that's a feature becoming increasingly rare in modern cars. As for the other infotainment functions, well, accessing these via this maddening touchpad is, for us, still better than having to stab away at the touchscreen, as you'd have to in a rival Jaguar XJ. The big 12.3-inch centre dash display that you control via this pad deals with all the usual navigation, radio, media, Bluetooth phone and climate functions, plus it shows a rear view camera and the selected settings of the drive mode select system. Internet connectivity via the onboard Wi-Fi hotspot is excellent, but it's extraordinary that the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring systems aren't available, even as options. Lexus has a setup for this called Miracast, but it's more restrictive. Another case of being different for the sake of being different? Well, you can't help but think so. As for cabin storage, well, apparently all the stowage areas are modelled on Japanese bonsai art. If that's the reason why the glove box and the door pockets are so small, then we could do without that. Still, you can store quite a bit in this big leather-topped central compartment between the seats here, which also incorporates a sliding upper tray, a coin tray, an aux-in point and a 12-volt socket. There's also a little compartment by the driver's right knee. There's the usual twin cup holders in this lidded area by the gear stick, and despite the fitment of a sunroof, you still get an overhead compartment for your sunglasses. Right, time to try the rear. Now, earlier we mentioned that Lexus isn't offering a long wheelbase body style option on this 5th generation model, but maybe that's not such an issue. I mean, this car is, after all, almost identically as lengthy in its standard form as a stretched BMW 7 Series or Mercedes S-Class would be. Only a long wheelbase Audi A8 is significantly longer. Once inside, though, you might be forgiven for wondering what the Japanese brand's done with all that space. For the point of view of legroom, you might think that you were in a Lexus GS from the next class down. I mean, here, the front seat's been positioned for an averagely sized adult. As you can see, my knees really aren't that far from the wood embellished panel on the seat back ahead. And that swept back profile doesn't do the ceiling height any favours either, and taller folk could find their heads brushing against the roof lining. With this top Premier spec variant, you get these rear seat entertainment monitors, but they're not of the touchscreen variety, and they have nothing like the usability nor the functionality of the removable tablet screens that you can have in the back of, say, an Audi A8. Don't get us wrong, you'd still enjoy a seat back here very much indeed, and it's certainly possible to get superbly comfortable. The luxury spec models that most will choose come with standard 18-way rear seat adjustment, while this Premier variant has shiatsu massage and 22-way adjustment, and that includes 3 preset seating positions with all functions selectable via this multifunction touchscreen in the rear central armrest. Business mode is a default one, then there's entertain, which reclines the seat, in this case for more more comfortable viewing of the entertainment monitor. And finally, the third relax setting introduces an extending ottoman leg rest while deeply reclining the seat back, and at the same time moving the front passenger seat to its furthest forward position to provide maximum legroom. At your destination, the seat will automatically return to its default position as soon as the door's opened. Some cars in this segment have a fixed console in the middle of the rear bench for operation of all the various backseat systems, but the way that this setup's been incorporated into the retractable armrest means that you have the option of pushing it up and taking a third passenger if need be, although this high centre transmission tunnel and the way that the seat's sculpted means that they wouldn't be very comfortable. That armrest incorporates cup holders here and a storage compartment with twin USBs and an HDMI point. There's also a 12-volt port in the centre console ahead, and in this Premier variant, a player for Blu-ray discs. Does anyone still play Blu-ray discs? These intricate Mark Levinson speaker grills and the doors are lovely, and more speakers are built into the suede trimmed ceiling, where you'll also find drop-down illuminated vanity mirrors. Even the seat back pockets feel nicely crafted. When you get out, the air suspension rises again to ease the process. And finally, let's take a look at the cargo area. Now, you'd expect a large luxury saloon measuring well over 5.2 metres to have an absolutely huge trunk. This one doesn't. The boot lid opens electrically with a wave of your foot beneath the bumper if need be. And there's a prominent notice with dire warnings in Japanese script threatening who knows what if you don't use it properly. There's just 430 litres of luggage capacity. Now, that's about 80 litres less than the class norm, and it's also less than most executive saloons from the next class down. Now, in practical terms, it'll probably be a couple of suitcases down on what you could fit into most rivals. Most potential owners won't care. They'll console themselves instead with the thought that sacrifices need to be made to accommodate those eco-friendly hybrid mechanicals. There are a few practical touches. Velcro straps just inside the boot lip and this right-hand corner, and a couple of bag hooks, although no 12-volt socket. You can make use of these 4 chromed tie-down points with the provided net that clips into them. Now, you'll find that stored in this little super shallow compartment beneath the boot floor. As you can see, the hybrid mechanicals mean that there's not much space beneath that panel for the storage of anything else, certainly not anything as large as a spare wheel. That's not an option. Although, in compensation, Lexus equips this car with run-flat tyres. Now, you can't have split-folding rear seat backs to extend the boot area either. Still, a couple of sets of golf clubs will, of course, easily fit, and most owners will be content with that. Other markets for this Lexus are trying to get their heads around the fact that for the first time in LS history, there's no V8 engine available with this car. For this country, there's the additional issue in that we can't have the twin-turbo 3.5-litre V6 engine, which was developed by the brand for this 5th generation design to replace that traditional power plant option. Just a normally aspirated, non-plug-in petrol-electric hybrid, another 3.5-litre V6, this one developing a combined output of 354 bhp. As is the Lexus way, there are no diesels. Rarity will be a major draw for likely buyers, with just 100 LS models likely to find buyers here each year. To put that into perspective, the segment-leading Mercedes S-Class sells about 2,500 units in this country every year, with rival BMW 7 Series and Tesla Model S contenders selling around 2,000 units annually. Even Porsche's more exclusive Panamera usually breaks into 4 figures. All this being the case, we were a little surprised to find such a wide range of trim variants offered to UK Lexus LS buyers, all based around the 500h multi-stage hybrid engine package we just mentioned. Now, there is an entry-level model priced at around £73,000, but most customers will want to find the £80,000 budget, which will get them either dynamic F-Sport trim or the more comfort-orientated luxury spec. Now, if the luxury variant suits, you'll be offered the £2,600 option of all-wheel drive. Around 45% of buyers, though, go the whole hog and buy in right at the top of the range with this Premier spec model, which comes only with all-wheel drive and a £98,000 price tag. Now, this is a version that you'll need for the exclusive Pleat complete equipment pack, which for around £7,600 more gives you a beautifully distinctive hand-pleated finish for the leather upholstery and unique Kiriko ornamental glass in the door panels, and that's what we've got here. Go on, treat yourself. After all, if you are a typical buyer, it's highly likely that someone else is paying. Discussing value is, of course, fairly relative when considering these sorts of sums, but likely buyers will still have one eye on the prices being asked for the other large luxury saloons in the segment that are vying for their interest. So, what else is there that's directly comparable to the LS500H? Well, at the time of this 5th generation LS model's launch, Mercedes hadn't included a full-on hybrid engine within its S-Class model lineup, but you can have a thing like that in the form of BMW's 740e and the PHEV version of Audi's A8. The BMW is the closer match. It's priced in base guise very similarly to a base LS, and unlike the Audi, it's available in the kind of standard wheelbase form that we have here. Both these two rivals use the plug-in hybrid approach that Lexus surprisingly has ignored for this car. As a result, the BMW and the Audi, if they're left plugged in overnight, will give you the kind of all-electric driving range, and that's typically around 20 miles, that this LS just can't offer. Now that not only saves fuel, but it also massively reduces their quoted CO2 emissions, which in turn makes them cheaper to tax. Now, you have to really want this Lexus to overlook that, but that's okay because a likely buyer seduced by the looks, the exclusive cabin and the rarity probably will. Are there other options? Well, not really any credible ones. To go for the segment-leading Mercedes S-Class, or if you're a bit more old school, a Jaguar XJ, then you'd have to have a diesel engine to get any sort of real efficiency parity with an LS hybrid. And as we said, that's precisely what most LS buyers don't want. Nevertheless, for the record, let's tell you that a comparable S350D would cost around about the same as a base LS, while a base Jaguar XJ diesel would save you about £13,000. For reference, in comparison to the same base LS, an entry-level BMW 730D would save you around £10,000, and a base diesel version of the Audi A8 50 TDI would save you around £5,000. What about 5-door options in this class? Well, we would be tempted by the Porsche Panamera 4e Hybrid, which gives you 4-wheel drive and petrol-electric PHEV plug-in hybrid power for about the same money as you'd need for the luxury all-wheel drive version of this LS, just over £80,000. But that is a very different, more sporting and less opulent kind of car. Also very different is the all-electric, all-wheel drive only Tesla Model S we mentioned earlier. Now this is another rival which would save you about £5,000 over a base LS, although only if you were going to go for the Tesla in its feeblest 75 kilowatt-hour form. The 100 kilowatt-hour Model S variant that you're more likely to want costs over £91,000. Enough with the comparisons. That we're going to assume that you've done your homework, you've decided on an LS, and if that's the case, then one of the reasons behind your decision is likely to be an expectation of a very complete standard specification. If so, then by and large, you won't be disappointed. Now, we think that you're probably going to want to progress beyond the rear-wheel drive entry-level version, which, unlike the other variants in the range, lacks air suspension and makes do with a lower grade of leather trim and audio provision. Still, the smooth leather that you do get with base trim is of decent quality, and most executives would probably be very happy with the entry-level stereo setup, a 12-speaker Pioneer system. Adaptive variable suspension also comes included, along with a head-up display, a powered sunroof, a 360-degree panoramic view monitor, and a reversing camera. Also, as part of the dual-zone climate control, you get what Lexus calls a climate concierge system. Now, this uses infrared technology to monitor the body temperatures of all the car's occupants and adjusts the climate control to suit. As for the media stuff, well, there's a full-house Lexus premium navigation infotainment package, including full European mapping, a DVD player, Bluetooth and various connected services. Smartphone mirroring comes courtesy of the Miracast setup, but that's not a patch on the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems, which you will find on much cheaper cars. Now, the other standard features included at the foot of the range are all those that you'd expect to find on a large luxury saloon of this price. So starting outside, there are 20-inch wheels, full LED headlights, power folding mirrors and an alarm, plus a powered boot lid and auto headlamps and wipers. And we also like the acoustic side window glass that at the front is water repellent. Inside there are heated and cooled front seats with 20-way power adjustment, an analog GPS clock and an auto dimming rearview mirror. Plus, as usual on this class of car, you get a drive mode select system, which allows you via various settings to tweak the steering feel, the throttle response, the gear shift timings and the ride quality to suit the way that you want to drive. But as we've said, almost all LS buyers will bypass the base model, except the need for an £80,000 budget, and switch their attention instead to the identically priced mid-range F-Sport and luxury variants. Now, both these trim levels upgrade you to a 23-speaker Mark Levinson QLI reference surround audio system, along with 28-way powered front seats, heated rear seats, ultra-suede headlining, a kick sensor for the powered boot lid, and more intelligent adaptive LED headlights. On to the points of differentiation between those two core trim levels. Now, Lexus has included the F-Sport option because that more dynamically orientated spec sold quite well in the previous generation model, but we're not really sure it sits that well with the opulent demeanour of this fifth generation design. An LS 500h F-Sport comes with its own even more distinctive interpretation of that intricate front spindle grille, plus the 20-inch wheels have a special design. There are jet black bodywork highlights with black branded brake calipers, and you get unique F-Sport front seats too, along with a special F-Sport combi meter instrument binnacle display. More importantly, the F-Sport variant is mechanically a bit different to the other LS derivatives. It's the only version in the range which features rear wheel steering, although that does limit it to a rear wheel drive only format. Of more interest to likely boardroom buyers will be the luxury spec models. There are two of those because you have the choice of either rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive with this trim level. Either way, luxury level highlights include softer semi-aniline leather upholstery, a wood-trimmed steering wheel and a front seat massage function. Plus, the rear passenger compartment will be a more opulent place to be, and that's thanks to ventilated seats with 18-way adjustment, 4-zone climate control and powered blinds for the rear and side windows. Now, that's all very nice, but quite a number of customers for this Lexus will be unwilling to settle for anything but the very best, which in the case of the LS range is represented by the Premier variant that we've been testing here. All-wheel drive is standard at this level, as is a rear seat entertainment package with a DVD Blu-ray player and the more sophisticated Lexus Safety System Plus A package. Now, we'll get to that in a minute. Now, probably the key Premier spec inclusion is a much more sophisticated 22-way power adjustable rear seat setup that's controlled by a multi-view monitor built into the armrest, and it features massage programs, special preheat seating modes and a power extending ottoman leg rest. Now, bear in mind, you have to have the Premier spec model to get the option of paying extra for two additional features that the wealthiest LS buyers will want. One is the pleat pack we mentioned earlier, which, as we said, gives you the special door cards with handcrafted glass and pleated leather. The other is sumptuous L-aniline leather upholstery, which is 30% softer than the already very supple semi-aniline hide. Who wants to be a millionaire? Well, if you go for the Premier model fitted out with those options, you'll feel like one. On lesser LS models, there aren't many offered options, the only significant one being metallic paint. You can also talk to your dealer about floor mats in rubber or textile and a rear bumper protection plate. Refreshingly, though, Lexus doesn't copy its German rivals in offering an exhaustive list of extra cost features. You'll find most, if not all, of what you'd like in your chosen level of spec. On to safety stuff. Now, you'd expect a proper, large, luxury segment saloon to also go large when it comes to cutting-edge, camera-driven electronic safety features, and the LS does, courtesy of the standard inclusion of the brand's Lexus Safety System Plus pack, and that includes 6 key elements. As you'd expect in this day and age, one of those is autonomous braking. Lexus calls it a pre-collision safety system, and it's one of those that scans the road ahead as you drive in search of potential collision hazards. If one's detected, you'll be warned. If you don't respond or you aren't able to, the brakes will automatically be applied to decrease the severity of any resulting accident. The other 5 Lexus Safety System Plus features can be quickly covered. Lane Keep Assist warns dozy drivers who have drifted over the delineating lines on the highway and helps them back into lane. Sway Warning sounds an alert and displays a warning if steering input, lane positioning and vehicle sway suggest driver fatigue. Adaptive Cruise Control automatically keeps you a safe distance behind the car in front on the highway. And Traffic Sign Recognition pictures road signs on the move and then displays them on the dash. Now the final element, automatic high beam, remotely dips your headlights at night. Now that's embellished above entry-level trim with a 2-stage AHS, adaptive high beam system, which features headlamps with 8 upper and 16 lower LEDs, which give finer control of the process. There's more too. A blind spot monitor works on the move to stop you from dangerously pulling out to overtake in front of another car. And the rear cross traffic alert system warns you of an approaching vehicle when you're reversing out of a parking space. If you want additional safety sophistication, then you have to have this top Premier version, which, as I mentioned earlier, comes with the brand's upgraded Lexus Safety System Plus A package. Now, this not only adds to the camera-driven safety kit roster, but it also includes some of the autonomous driving technology that buyers in this segment are now expecting. So let's begin with the 2 extra safety features. Now, we really like the pedestrian alert element, which the Safety System Plus A package adds to that pre-collision autonomous braking package we were just talking about. Now, we're often told about modern autonomous braking technology, which actively searches for people that you might be about to hit, but this Lexus system goes a stage further than that. If there is a chance that you might collide with someone, then their location will flash up on the LS's head-up display, and if the car thinks that you won't be able to brake in time to avoid an impact, it will actually steer you around them. Equally useful is front cross traffic alert, which uses a forward direction radar to alert you to potentially dangerous traffic approaching from either side at intersections. We're a bit less enthusiastic about the Safety System Plus A package's included autonomous driving tech. It's a Level 2 package provided under the banner of something the brand calls Lexus Co-Drive. Now here there's a more sophisticated millimetre wave radar and a camera with a wider forward recognition range. That enables more sophisticated dynamic radar cruise control and a lane tracing assist feature. Now both sound helpful when it comes to the goal of relaxing long-distance LS drivers. Now unfortunately, our testing suggests that the package hasn't been developed as completely as rival German brand setups. Take the dynamic radar cruise control, which is supposed to make stop-start traffic progress easier. In reality, when you're in a queue, the system waits too long to accelerate, it does that too gently, and then waits too long to apply the brakes, and it does that too harshly, so it's anything but relaxing. We didn't really like the Lexus Co-Drive LTA, lane tracing assist feature either. Now this is supposed to keep the car within lane delineating lines without you needing to steer, although you do have to keep your hands on the steering wheel at all times. And we found that this didn't work too well on secondary roads, and when it did work on the highway, the lane markings needed to be brightly painted. Otherwise, the LTA just doesn't recognise them. And even when it did, the car sometimes tended to bounce between the markings on each side of the lane with all the subtlety of a ball in a pinball machine. In other words, autonomous driving technology seems apparently to be a work in progress at the Toyota Corporation. So let's leave them to it and finish this section of our review with a quick rundown of the more conventional safety kit that's fitted to all LS models. Pretty much everything that you'd expect is, of course, present and correct. So you can tick off a pedestrian-friendly bonnet, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, and no fewer than 10 airbags, twin front, side and curtain bags, plus knee bags for both front seat occupants and outer rear seat side airbags. Luxury and Premier spec models have 12 airbags, and that's thanks to the further inclusion of a couple of rear seat cushion bags. On all variants, you'll find the tyre pressure warning system and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. In addition, there are all the usual electronic driving aids for braking, traction and stability. Systems, and in most other cars, will only activate at the last minute if the situation demands it. In an LS, though, it's all done a bit more cleverly. The so-called Vehicle Dynamics Integration Management setup will coordinate everything together and will take action to correct the car just a little bit earlier. What do you buy if you're a company CEO wanting a more individual boardroom segment large luxury saloon projecting the right kind of eco-minded image? Well, probably not anything diesel powered. Plug-in hybrid BMW 740e or Audi A8 PHEV would be closer to the mark, but those kinds of models are rather predictable choices. Now true, this Lexus LS 500h hybrid model doesn't feature that fashionable plug-in technology, but it's still pretty effective in terms of frugality and cleanliness. Here we're trying the all-wheel drive variant that many will want, which manages 39.8 mpg on the combined cycle and 161 grams per kilometre of CO2. If rear-wheel drive is sufficient for you, then you can improve those readings to 43.5 mpg and 147 grams per kilometre. And that means a VED band H and a reasonably acceptable benefit-in-kind rate of 28%. Will all this be acceptable for likely buyers? Well, it depends on their perspective. Now, some may point out that a similarly priced BMW 740e with plug-in hybrid tech is, according to official figures, able to deliver 134.5 mpg on the combined cycle and emit only 49 grams per kilometre. That's quite a difference. In response, Lexus points out that one, the NEDC cycle figures aren't even close to being realistic pointers to what you get in day-to-day motoring, which is true, and that two, surveys show that most owners of PHEVs often don't bother to regularly plug them in. Arguably, without that electrified element, a plug-in model might even be less economic than an older tech hybrid like this one. Arguably. Anyway, you can debate all that until the cows come home. Let's just say that you've decided that you like this LS and you want to justify its purchase. Well, if so, let's help you to do that by pointing out that this 2.4-tonne piece of Oriental real estate will, in rear-driven hybrid form, cost you not much more to run than an old Ford Fiesta ST. Now, to put those figures into more relevant class perspective, something like, say, a 3-litre supercharged Jaguar XJ would use about 30% more fuel and would be about 40% dirtier at the exhaust pipe, yet it still wouldn't be able to quite match the performance of the LS 500h. Of course, during much of your urban motoring in this hybrid Lexus, say when you're inching along in traffic with the engine seamlessly disabled and battery power in motion, you won't be emitting any emissions at all. Plus, it helps in this respect that cold weather operational efficiency has been improved with the brand's more recent hybrid technology. Now that means that whereas previously a chilly morning might have seen the drive unit default straight to the petrol engine on startup, now it's more like to revert to the preferable electric mode as you glide out silently into the traffic. And that's a pretty cool sensation in a car of this kind. At higher speeds in the LS 500h, you need to bear in mind that the quoted fuel figures are even more heavily dependent than normal on the driver assuming a significant degree of restraint. Now, certainly to get anywhere near the 40 miles per gallon mark in day-to-day use with this hybrid version of this Lexus, you'll need to keep the car locked into the Drive Mode Select System's Eco Mode, which moderates the throttle response and the engine power output while tweaking the climate control. You may also want to keep an eye on the useful graphical fuel consumption display that's provided as part of the infotainment system's info section. There are trip info and past record screens so you can gauge your ongoing success in fuel economy and energy regeneration. What else might you need to know about running cost issues? Well, buyers may need reminding that petrol-electric Lexus models no longer qualify for free congestion charging. On the plus side, though, residual values look pretty healthy, at least as good as those of the posh Teutonic brands. After 3 years and 60,000 miles, independent experts reckon that an LS 500h will still be worth 41% of what you originally paid for it. Do remember, too, when considering depreciation, that an LS is better equipped than many of its German rivals. To match this car's spec, you'd have to spend extra cash on options with those cars, and that is money that you'd be unlikely to get back at resale time. Where Lexus could do better is with the warranty it provides. Although there is a 5-year package to cover the hybrid engine, every other part of the LS package has to be covered by an unremarkable 3-year, 60,000 mile deal. And that doesn't seem overly generous in this day and age, particularly since parent company Toyota offers 5-year cover on its models. You can, of course, pay extra to extend that cover, but in our view, you shouldn't have to. But does that matter? I mean, this is, after all, a Lexus, a car in which market experience suggests virtually nothing is ever likely to go wrong. The facts are that hybrid technology generates fewer warranty claims than conventional petrol or diesel engines do, and if something ever should happen, well, so charming and helpful are the award-winning dealers in the network that you may almost end up being glad it did. That's just as well, given that you're going to be visiting them relatively often for routine maintenance. Servicing intervals are every year or 10,000 miles, and that's a little more frequent than we'd like, although a prepaid servicing plan can help to keep costs in check. At least the cost of those garage visits should be surprisingly low. That's thanks to the low maintenance requirements which are built into this car's hybrid synergy drive system. As part of this, there's no starter motor or alternator to go wrong, no drive belts to break, and there's a maintenance-free timing chain and no particulate filter to get clogged up with fumes. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and the battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps to extend the life of the brake pads. Now let's finish with insurance, which predictably isn't going to be cheap. The entry-level model is rated at Group 47E, while the rear-driven luxury and F-Sport spec models are rated at Group 48E. A luxury variant with all-wheel drive is 49E, and this top Premier all-wheel drive derivative is Group 50E. The LS is and has always been the car its brand is built on. The day that Lexus can't bring us a credible, large luxury saloon to challenge the best of the premium European makers will be the day the company has taken its eye off the ball, with too much of its focus on sports saloons, compact executive hatchbacks and SUVs. This fifth generation LS reassures us that time is unlikely to ever come. While this isn't a class leader, it's still a desirable and very different class contender in so many ways, primarily when it comes to refinement and cabin luxury in this segment. Travelling in one of these is an experience, but one that few boardroom buyers will ever get to try. They'll dismiss this car for its lack of diesel power or plug-in hybrid technology. They'll note that the autonomous driving tech isn't quite up at the level of rivals, and they'll bemoan the smallish boot and the lack of a long wheelbase body style. Or they'll assume that driving one will be like piloting a waterbed, all of which is a pity because, for all its faults, this LS is a car that many top executives would really enjoy owning. It has what so many of its rivals lack, a really distinct identity, something different in concept and execution from what's on offer from the European premium brands that the Lexus marque has never quite conquered. Objectively, well, we'd have to tell you that those competing manufacturers make better cars in this segment. Subjectively, though, we can't help really rather liking this one. So it comes down to the mindset that you use when choosing a car like this. If you're a likely buyer, then it'll have been an objective perspective that will have got you to the point of being able to reward yourself with this kind of exclusive conveyance. Perhaps, though, just perhaps, you might want to take a break from that approach for a purchase that's so personal and one that you'll have to live with so closely. If heart can rule head, then this LS has a chance to surprise, engross and spoil you, if you let it. We'd be very tempted to.